All right, everybody, welcome on into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pascal alongside Eric Alderman, and we are talking everything KBO League. We got some power rankings, some games to go over, and some top picks as well. Eric, not much in the power rankings in terms of movement, but we are seeing a shift in the schedule now. Can you explain to the fans what's going on right now in the KBO in terms of scheduling?
Yeah, so we started the year with 2 3-game series for each team every week, one Tuesday to Thursday, one Friday to Sunday. For the past several weeks, we jumped back to 3 2-game series, which is not something we ever see over in the States. I don't remember exactly how many weeks that was, a month to 2 months or so of 2-game sets. But we're back to the original formatting where teams play 2 3-game series. There's only, I believe, 3 weeks of this left. And then the KBO does an interesting thing where they don't schedule all of the rainout makeup games right away. So if you look at any team's remaining games, you'll notice it doesn't add up to the 144 that they play in a given year. And that's because there's a set of games for everybody that hasn't been scheduled yet. I think they must wait until they know exactly how many. But if you look at the end of schedules from previous seasons, it's all these scattered 1 off, 2 off, 3 off at the end of the year. So we've got a few weeks of these and then a week or so of oddly scheduled rainout makeup games at the end.
Yes, very important for any futures bettors in terms of what you're looking at long term. And we're going to start with these teams in the power rankings, where they stand right now. It's been a long season. We're seeing what forms of these teams we're getting as of right now. So moving into it, first up, we got the NC Dinos. We're in the hat here. Still number one, last week number one. Seem to be back in vintage form. Eric, are we confident that the Dinos are back for sure?
Close to it. I mean, 11-1 over the last 2 is pretty good. And with how little time there is left, the odds of them relinquishing a 5-game lead that they have over the Heroes in second place seems like that's unlikely to happen. And of course, the winner of the regular season in the KBO gets a bye all the way to the Korean Series, their version of the World Series that's much more accurately named than the one we have over here. So it seems unlikely, barring a complete collapse, and the Dinos don't look like they're going to collapse. They were pretty mediocre for a very long time in the middle of the season. I noted in the power rankings, they were 24-6 in their first 30, and then they were just a single game over 500 in their next 74 games. But they look like they looked at the beginning of the year right now. Most importantly, the pitching staff is really getting the job done. If you remember early in the year, they were the highest scoring team who was allowing the fewest runs, and it didn't look like anybody was ever going to catch them. The pitching staff really fell off in the middle of the year. I believe they were maybe ranked as low as 5th, at least 4th in runs per game for quite a while. But I believe they're back up to second best because they've allowed just 3.3 runs per game over this 12-game stretch. There's not much more they could be doing right now to look like the best team in the league.
Yeah, we see those number 1 and number 2 rankings back on top with that scoring and preventing runs. You mentioned lineup construction briefly. We know we've talked about Aaron Altair and his lineup construction, but just talking about the DFS name to know for the top team, Minwoo Park. Is there anything there with him moving from leadoff to now number 3, maybe getting a slightly fewer at-bats, but it seems to be working for him?
Yeah, it should be slightly fewer at-bats, slightly fewer runs, but more RBI. 14 RBI in 13 games for him in that role is quite good, more than a run batted in per game. He pretty much has a leadoff skill set, not really get a homer much, and he does steal bases. But, he's a good hitter, and putting a good hitter third, even if those good hits are mostly in the form of a ton of singles rather than a decent amount of singles and some extra base hits, he's still clearly able to get the job done. So,
yeah, that's what we're looking at with the Dinos. In case you're just tuning in, this is KBO Chats Live. We are taking comments as well. Josh, welcome you guys in as well. Yeah, the Dinos at minus 3.5 there. And Barry welcoming us in. Moving on down to the KT Wiz. This team was, Mr. 500 last week. They were on a 5-game winning streak, then did a weird win-loss. I don't know if we're going to see this trend continue now that they're going to be facing the Lions and then again the Twins. But I'd expect a little bit more from the number 2 team here in the power rankings, going a little bit better than just 500.
Yeah, they maybe could have fallen, except as we'll get to in a second, really nobody below them did anything really. Basically, every team won between 2 and 4 games in the league, except for the Dinos. So not the most exciting showing from the Wiz this past week, but it's still been a very strong September, 17-7 in September. It's exactly the sort of stretch run they need, and they seem pretty safe. They're safe by 4.5 games right now. This would be the first playoff berth in franchise history in their 6th season. I believe they finished as high as 6th, maybe it was 7th last year, just 1 or 2 spots out. And it would take a collapse for them to fall out of it at this point, which is an impressive achievement for a team that's never gotten here before.
Yes, we're hoping they don't have that collapse, but it is the KBO. We never know what's going to happen here, but they do have a pretty solid lead as of now. Moving on, you're talking about these mediocre teams, or not good teams going, looking like mediocre teams last week. We're looking at the Heroes, the LG Twins, and the Deucin Bears at 3 through 5. I mean, every team in this bunch looked like maybe a number 1, number 2 candidate at some point in the year. And now they're just, I don't know if you just give it to bad luck or what's going on. But the Heroes, they were very hot in August, and now they're just like you notice here, 12-12-1 through September. I mean, that's not something that you want to be seeing, especially when the Dinos are heating up right now.
Yeah, I really thought when the Heroes caught the Dinos a couple weeks ago that their momentum was going to keep going. I think they looked like a more well-rounded team since that Dinos early run ended, but that's clearly not been the case. They've had a few injuries. Byung-Ho Park, their first baseman, former major leaguer, out for the regular season with, I think it's a broken finger. They're also without their catcher, Dongwon Park, with an injury. Addison Russell is really slumping. His OPS is below 700 at this point. But they have other hitters picking up the slack. It's certainly not a sunk team by any means. Plenty of talent in the lineup. The rotation's scary too. Hyun-Hee Han, who I highlighted here, 0 runs in 3 straight starts. Really an impressive run for him. And they already have Jake Brigham and Eric Jokic. If Han, obviously if he stays this hot, he's the best pitcher in the league. But if he, falls back to being merely pretty good, which I think he's been for a couple months now, it's a pretty scary top 3. Could even be top 4. Won-Tae Choi is somebody who was supposed to be good coming into the year. He's battled some shoulder issues, has an ERA above 5, but he has posted ERAs in the high 3s in the past, and that would give him a really strong top 4 that I think can compete with anybody in the league.
And when you talk about teams that have that top-end pitching, we look at the LG Twins, and Tyler Wilson and Casey Kelly maybe weren't that at the beginning of this year, maybe were a little better last year. But right now, this Twins team at number 4 below the Heroes isn't really stringing anything together. They haven't won 3 in a row since September 3rd, which, when you're in a playoff hunt like this and you want to be climbing the standings, that's not good. What are you seeing now from the Twins? Do they have that same level of depth that the Heroes do on both the pitching and the hitting?
Yeah, I don't think they're far off. I mean, if you look at the runs scored and runs allowed, they're 2nd in runs scored per game. They're 3rd in runs allowed. They're right up there. They're a very balanced team. Just got a few too many guys not playing at their best right now, but certainly not all of them. Roberto Ramos had 5 homers in a 5-game stretch last week. Just ended. He went hitless in his next 2 games, as he does sometimes, but he's certainly quite hot right now. There was a question in the chat about whether Mel Rojas Jr. is going to win the Triple Crown. Roberto Ramos is going to really push him in the home run category. Rojas certainly could retake that one. He's only 1 behind. I would never expect a player to win the Triple Crown. I think Rojas still needs to catch up by, looks like 11 points on Jose Fernandez in the batting average category. And he only has a 1 RBI lead over Hyun-Soo Kim in RBI. So I wouldn't expect him to do it. He's going to finish in the running in all 3 categories, though, for sure. I think he's going to be putting up a fight for it down the final weeks. I think it's definitely going to be something to watch, even if my expectation is that he'll lose out on at least one of those 3, with a guy like Ramos maybe being the most likely.
Yes, it's a very competitive Triple Crown race right now. I still think it will be Rojas, but Ramos definitely gave him a run for his money in that power department, something we saw a lot from Ramos earlier this season. And speaking of power, actually, something we have not seen from the Deuce and Bears, they've been all pitching. You notice Chris Flex in there. He's back. I remember when we were like, when is this guy going to return? What's he going to be? He's going to be an ace now, is that's what he's looking like right now. But now we're going to have to see if, Jose Miguel Fernandez and these guys can step up offensively to give him some run support, which I really, don't know if they can do, sitting at number 5 on the power rankings.
Yeah, I do still have them 5 here because they haven't started winning yet. But, man, it really looks like they should any day now. Their pitching was the problem all year, but they finally have Flexen back, and they won Jun Choi, the guy they brought into the rotation to replace him. Looks like a very legitimate number 3 starter. Their pitching on the whole has really been quite good. Just 3.4 runs per game over the last 20 games would smash the best pitching staff in the league. Unfortunately, they're hitting like the NY Eagles at the moment. 3.6 runs per game over the last 17 is below the Eagles' 3.7 on the year. But there's just not much reason to believe that's going to continue. There's too many talented hitters on this Bears team who are all slumping at the same time. Just no reason that I can think of that they're going to keep up the depths of these slumps. And Jose Fernandez, I did recommend on today's cheat sheet because he started showing signs late last week that he's climbing out of the depths of his slump. But Jae-Lo, Jaewon Kim have not been what they're supposed to be, and their secondary guys aren't stepping up either. But I've said in the past that if you're going to be a mediocre team, you'd rather be quite good in one area and quite bad in another, because it's easier to move from quite bad to merely mediocre. I think the Bears are going to do that. I think now that they can pitch, eventually these bats are going to come around. They've been mediocre enough all year that they're going to have a real slog through several rounds of the playoffs, I think, to get back to their 6th straight Korean series. But it's got to be coming. I mean, there's too much talent in this lineup for them to keep slumping like this. And now that they can pitch too, I think they're a very scary team.
Yeah, definitely going to be difficult, though, if they are in that 5 spot, just because of the way the KBO playoff format works, where it's one series at a time, and that 5 seed has a long way to go, has to go through everyone in order to just get to the Super Bowl, if you will, of the KBO. So moving down, you're talking about one team trying to do one thing really well. The Kia Tigers were that pitching-wise early this year. Still at number 6 this week. Only 2 wins last week, a missed opportunity for them. But you do have Hun Jung Yang as your DFS name to know. So maybe that pitching has some maybe a chance, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, they're still going to be without Aaron Brooks for several weeks, if not the whole season, as he goes back to be with his family after they were in a pretty serious car crash, which definitely throws a damper on their playoff push. They are just a game back of the Bears. This should have been their chance to catch up to the Bears, though, with the Bears remaining mediocre for quite a while. And the Tigers really just got rocked. They were outscored by an average score of 7 to 2.3 over the last week. Just they were not competitive. And now they're facing the Heroes and the Bears, 2 teams that have been mediocre but are very talented. So I think unless the Tigers figure things out pretty soon, this could really be a make or break week. I think if they have another 2 and 4 week, well, if the Bears figure things out, I think that gap could be a lot bigger than just one game by the end of the week. So definitely a couple key series here.
Yeah, and they'll be facing some stiff competition against the Heroes and the Bears. As always, too, in case you're just hopping in, rotowire.com/free KBO, where you can check out all these stats and tools that we're going over here. Just about wrapping up the power rankings. I like going over them here. We do want to get to the games. Last of the kind of fringe playoff competitors is the Lotte Giants. Dan Straley, he seems to be back in shape. He's our DFS name to know. But beyond that, they're not putting anything together. 11 and 14 in the month of September, something that they can't do if they actually want to have a viable chance at that 5th seed in the playoffs. Is that still in the picture now with Straley back to form, or do you see that offense just having no chance?
It's in the picture. They're only 4 games out of the Bears, and it would just take a couple poor weeks from the Bears to close that gap. But we've had a couple poor weeks from the Bears, and the Giants haven't done it. To be fair, 11-14 in a month is probably what we would have expected from them most months heading into the year, since they finished last in the league by quite some margin last season. So I probably would expect similar performance down the stretch, but still not out of it. If you want to root for a long shot, it just takes one hot streak from them combined with a poor stretch from the Bears. If there's still 4 or more games this time out next week, though, I think we're going to have to start calling them out of it, I think, pretty soon.
Yes, and that's pretty much all the playoff teams we have for the power rankings. Do want to move on to the actual contenders of the games. But briefly, the Lions, Eagles, and Wyverns. Eagles, they're at number 9. They've been hot recently. I know they ran to the Dinos towards the end of the week, but hey, they got more wins in their last 10 than a couple of competitive teams right now. 6-4 in their last 10, much better than, what we're looking at some of these actual playoff teams, such as the Bears and the Heroes. Anything there with the Eagles? Just maybe playing, spoiler to one of these teams late in the season, or is this just, reversion to the mean? They have to win some games.
Yeah, they do have to win some games. They have a couple pitchers who are capable of a decent performance every now and then, and Min-Woo Kim and Shi-Wan Jung. Don't necessarily trust their former big leaguers in Warwick Soppold and Chad Bell very much. They could win the occasional game. I'm definitely not treating them as the same team I treated them as earlier in the year. I do occasionally recommend some of their players on my cheat sheets. They're firmly in the level of normal bad team at this point, and a normal bad team can win 4 games in a week once, which this is the first time all year that they've had a winning record over the course of a week. But, a normal bad team should do that every now and then, and I think they're just a normal bad team at this point. So congrats to them.
Yeah, for the Eagles, that is plenty, considering how bad they were earlier this season. All right, moving into the daily lineups, we're going to go through each game, give a pick with a winner and the total. We first start with the Lotte Giants and the LG Twins. Adrian Sampson facing off against Tyler Wilson. Wilson is coming off 2 excellent 7-inning gems. Sampson, can't really say the same thing for him. He was lit up for 6 runs against the KT Wiz. I would think you got to go Twins here, but Sampson could be good for a solid start.
Yeah, this is the first of 5 games where we have a current playoff team going against a non-playoff team. Somehow we ended up with no matchup between playoff teams. So this is one of the better ones if you still consider the Giants to be a contender. And like you said, we've got 2 pitchers kind of going in opposite directions. For Sampson, he had a 5-start stretch with an ERA of 1.72 and a whip of 1.05. Looked like he had suddenly turned things around. Though there was a red flag in that stretch that he only struck out 17 batters in 31.1 innings, which certainly not the mark of a dominant starter by any means. Somebody who was maybe getting by on some batted ball luck. And it looked like all that luck came back in his last game where he couldn't get out of the 5th inning and gave up 6 runs while striking out just 1. Wouldn't expect him to be that bad normally, but there's not much reason to believe he can sustain that strong stretch. If you look at his season overall, he does walk just 7% of batters. That's about 2 ticks better than league average, but he's striking out just 13.6%, well below league average there by about 4 percentage points. So he's very much a pitch-to-contact guy. When you've got guys like Roberto Ramos making contact on the other side, guys like Hyun-Soo Kim, I wouldn't expect things to go well for him. But again, he's had a decent amount of pretty good starts lately, so I wouldn't count the Giants completely out with him on the mound.
Yeah, normally when we see that foreign starter, we have to, recognize that and, maybe see that opposing offense taking a slight dip. LG Twins are ranked second in runs per game, but when we take a look at their recent production, not too many runs, just 2.6 runs per game in their last 3. Maybe they bounce back against Sampson, or maybe this is a trend. They did score 8 in that loss back on the 24th. But which direction do you think this Twins offense is going to go? Does Roberto Ramos continue it against Sampson, or do they maybe stay a little cold?
I think they've got too many talented bats in the top of the order. Ramos and Hyun-Soo Kim are the best, but most of those top 6 are guys I've found myself recommending on the cheat sheets at one point or another. Chang Han recently had like an 18-game hitting streak or so that ended a week or so ago. Very, very good on-base guy at the top of the order. Yunsun Che, their number 5 hitter, is a guy I've liked at times. Is just a solid all-around above-average hitter. He's had some injury problems, but looks very, very playable whenever he's in the lineup. They're also heavily left-handed at the moment. Che is the only guy in their expected top 6 who bats right-handed against the right-handed Samson. That should be another small boost to the Twins. So I think they have enough talent that they should overcome a mediocre, probably at best, starter in Samson.
Yeah. Unsoo Kim, pretty great average his last couple of games, batting near 400 his last 9. He's the number 4 batter for the Twins. Normally, I would think we go all Twins here with Tyler Wilson, but this Lotte Giants team is 1 game removed from dropping 16 runs on the Kia Tigers. Does that maybe worry you a little bit going with Tyler Wilson, who still has an ERA over 4 on the season?
Yeah, I'm not super confident in Wilson. His last 2 starts, he's only given up, I believe, 1 run, and he's got a whip under 1, but he only struck out 8 batters in 14 innings. He's not necessarily a high strikeout guy, so seeing him have some success with mediocre strikeout numbers isn't out of nowhere, but it doesn't suggest that he's suddenly completely dominant. And over his 3 starts before that, it was an ERA of 8.50 and a whip of 1.56. So it seems like he's mostly past that, but again, not in necessarily quite the most convincing of ways. And on the season as a whole, he has been pretty much more good than great all year. Reliable, but that ERA in the low 4s is pretty deserved. The Giants are heavily right-handed, which does hurt them against Wilson. They're not a particularly compelling lineup, but if they do go off, it wouldn't be completely out of nowhere, given that, Wilson really has only had those 2 starts recently where he was good, and he wasn't necessarily dominant in those.
All right, so might not see the best version of Wilson since, like you said, he's been more good than amazing, which he has been his last 2 starts, that .64 ERA over his last 14 innings pitched. Where are we going here? I would think you'd have to go with the Twins, but the total is set at 9 runs, which I think the Twins could easily hit themselves, but Samson is capable of holding a team down for just a couple. What do we think for the Lotte Giants and the LG Twins?
Yeah, I'm going to go Twins. Better pitcher, better lineup. Not particularly difficult there. And that over/under seems pretty low. I would have to have more faith in both starters than I do. I think neither starter's bad. Wilson on the whole has been good. Samson on the whole has been pretty poor. But they're both, at best, they're untrustworthy. And I think, certainly both capable of having a strong game at the same time and hitting that under, but I think it's likely that at least one of them has one of their bad starts this time.
All right, so we're going with the LG Twins and the under 9 runs. Moving on now, we have the KT Wiz facing off against the Samsung Lions. William Cuevas, he's bounced back nicely after being lit up by the Dinos on the 11th. 2.08 ERA in his last 13 innings pitched. Which version of Cuevas will we get tonight? Do you trust him?
Not quite, but that Dino start you're talking about is his only start in his last 7 where he's given up more than 3 earned runs. And over his last 10, he's got a 3.88 ERA, 1.38 whip, which I guess is not a whole lot better than his season-long numbers. But he's been mostly reliable for a long time here. But 29 strikeouts against just 20 walks in 55 and 2/3 innings in his last 10 starts. That means he's striking out less than 3 batters per start here, 2.9. Math gets pretty easy when you're talking about 10 starts here. So that's not really indicative of a dominant run by any means. Again, it's more contact management, and it is working for him. But anytime a guy's success has been more contact management based, you always have to wonder. It only takes a few balls finding the gaps rather than finding outfielders' gloves to have a poor outing like he did against the Dinos there. Of course, 2 homers doesn't help either. And he is pitching in the league's most hitter-friendly park here, Daegu Samsung Lions Park, which also isn't exactly what you want when you're giving up a high amount of contact. So I'd say on the whole, I maybe somewhat trust him, but not nearly as much as I'd like to, I think, given that he's generally not giving up runs lately.
Okay, so not a huge believer in Cuevas despite the decent performances he's seen recently. Switching over to the offensive side, but staying with the Wiz, they went 500 last week, but in those wins, we went back 7.3 runs per game over their last 3 wins. Talking about the most hitter-friendly park, maybe could they put up a big total tonight? Mel Rojas Jr. going for that triple crown. How do we feel about the KT offense?
I would expect them to have a big day here with the park. Like you said, they were my recommended stack, one of my 2 recommended stacks on today's RotoWire cheat sheet. Mel Rojas is part of that, though there's question marks with him. He didn't start on Sunday due to a sore hip, but he did appear off the bench. If I had to guess, I would say he's playing tonight, just given that they had a day off Monday and he did appear in a bench capacity in the last game. But for daily fantasy players, that's definitely something to keep an eye on if you're not someone who can set your lineup at 4 a.m. or whatever it is your local time. I do still think they'll have plenty without him. Jigyun Huang, the third baseman, has been one of the best hitters for most of the year. He had an OPS under 700. It's in the high 680s for his first 35 or so games. But since then, it's been in the high 900s, I believe, since the end of that stretch. I think he's tied with Preston Tucker's season-long numbers. So he's basically been hitting like Preston Tucker for most of the season throughout the first 5 weeks or so. Former San Francisco Giant over there never really did much in the majors, but when a guy is good enough to at least attempt the jump, he's quite good. And he has been quite good for quite some time. Becco Gong gives him another talented bat in the heart of the order, though I didn't put him in today's stack just because he's a left-handed hitter against a southpaw today. But I think he's maybe still startable anyway, given that Seungmin Lee for the Lions does not look like a very intimidating arm at all.
Yeah, the young lefty hasn't gone more than 4.2 innings pitched, 4 2/3. Hasn't gone deep, hasn't done well. Never good when you see struggles in second start. I would think this would be a big over. You see it set at, where'd it go? Set at 11, though. How do we feel about that total? Because I can't imagine the Lions, even with Cuevas that they'd be facing, could put up more than 3 or 4.
I think the Lions have a decent chance of scoring some runs if Cuevas is off, given the park too. I like Daniel Palka tonight. He's started off pretty slow, but he's riding a 6-game hitting streak. I've talked about Dong Yup Kim recently. He's the most mispriced player on DraftKings. In his last 15 games, Dong Yup Kim hitting .433 with 5 homers, 15 runs, 16 RBI. And yet he costs, I think, under $3,000 on DraftKings. So they've got some guys who can hit, and they've got a park to hit in. But the main reason this is a pretty easy over is Seungmin Lee. In all 4 of his appearances so far, the rookie for the Lions, all 4 of his appearances, he's allowed more runs than innings. He hasn't had a single outing that's been remotely successful. In the Futures League, he does have a 3.95 ERA, which is not terrible, but when a guy is merely a close to 4 ERA in the minors, there's no reason to believe he's going to shut down KBO pitching. 6 strikeouts against 11 walks so far at the KBO level. There's just no way to paint it in really a positive light for him. So I think Wiz should knock him around. And if they knock him out early and you get to the soft underbelly of the Lions bullpen in the 3rd inning, that helps the Wiz hitters too.
All right. I like that. I believe in Cuevas a little bit more. I think we could see one more good start from him, but it is a very hitter-friendly ballpark they'll be facing off against at 5:30 a.m. Eastern tonight/tomorrow morning, deep tonight, however you watch it, wherever you are in the world. Eric, where are we going with against the Lions?
It's got to be Wiz, given that I don't have any faith in Sungmin Lee, and it's got to be over for the exact same reason.
All right. High total there at 11, but we are going with the over. Moving on now, we have the SK Wyverns facing off against the NC Dinos. Moon is one of the better starters for the Wyverns, but I don't really care. I kind of love me some Drew Rosinski. Back on track, 2.92 ERA in his last 4 with 30 strikeouts. He faced SK back on the 17th. 7 strong innings, no runs, just 3 hits against 9 strikeouts and 1 walk. I think it might be more of the same with this Dinos Wyverns matchup.
Yeah, I think if this was Sungwon Moon against somebody in the Dinos back end of the rotation, the Wyverns might have a chance. Moon is a pretty good pitcher. He's on pace to have an ERA in the high 3s for his second straight season. Not dominant by any means, but he had a stretch of 13 straight starts earlier this year where he allowed no more than 3 runs. He's failed to do that in 3 of his 6 starts since, but it's not like he's been terrible recently. 4.54 ERA and nearly a strikeout per inning in his last 6 starts. So he's gone from quite good to mediocre, but he's a pretty talented arm. Above average strikeout rate, below average or better than average walk rate. So is good enough that I wouldn't necessarily stack the Dinos for daily fantasy here, although they're talented enough they can score on anybody. But even though he's talented enough himself, Drew Rosinski should be significantly better than him. He had a poor stretch, a 5-start stretch in late July and through late August, where he had 3 quite poor starts and had a 7.33 ERA and a 1.89 WHIP over those 5 starts. But since then, in his last 5 starts, it's a 2.84 ERA and a WHIP of 1.07. In his last 3, he's been even better with 8 strikeouts at least in each. So he's one of the best starters in the league, and he's in his best form now. So I don't think it's going to matter that Sungwon Moon is pretty good. I think this is still pretty easy Dinos.
Yeah, I gotta love some Rosinski action. I misspelled his name there. Rosinski, gotta love it when he's going for the Dinos. In terms of the Dinos streaking, I can't imagine that they'd run into any sort of trouble with the Wyverns. Their offense has been firing on all cylinders. Is there any room for hesitation with the Wyverns where you could go contrarian, or is this an easy Dinos pick?
The Wyverns are also going to be without Jung Choi, their star hitter, who's one of the best power hitters all time in KBO. He's on paternity leave, and they, of course, lost Tyler White very soon after they got him. So their lineup is pretty much just Jamie Romack and a whole lot of rather unexciting players. And Romack is not necessarily in his best form lately. I think he's been fine. There's just I don't see much there to give Rosinski much trouble. Dinos, they've got Sungbum Na back from a hamstring injury. He's gone 6 for 10 in 4 games since his return. Just not much points to a Wyverns win here.
All right, so we're taking the Dinos. The total is set at 9.5. Pretty low. I'd imagine pretty much all of them would have to come from the Dinos with Rosinski on the bump. Can the Dinos do it? Can they score 10?
I don't think so. I think Sungwon Moon is pretty good. If it was against anybody else, I think the Dinos might be able to hit the over on their own, but I think Moon is going to keep this respectable here. But I don't think the Wyverns are going to score enough to support him to make it much of a game.
Barry agreeing with you. Dinos tonight. It's the back end of rotation, maybe right. Slips. We'll have to see. But we got the Dinos and the under 9.5. Moving on, we have the Doosan Bears facing off against the Hanwha Eagles. The Bears, a playoff team, but the Hanwha Eagles seem to be their kryptonite. They lost both games last week when they faced off. Won Jun Choi, though, might be able to turn things around for the Bears. In this one, though, he has a 2.23 ERA in his last 40 innings pitched, and he actually just faced, or not just faced, but back in June, on the road against Hanwha, 5 strong innings, no runs, just 2 hits, and 7 strikeouts against 1 walk. Can he repeat this start and maybe change the Bears' fortunes against the Eagles?
Yeah, the Bears do have a losing record against the Eagles on the season, 5-4 in the Eagles' favor. But I think that's more of a statistical curiosity than anything else. I can't see why that would be particularly predictive, and I think Choi should help them even up the season series here. He's been really everything the Bears could have asked for since he stepped into the rotation while Chris Flexen was out with that broken foot. He has 13 starts on the year, one of them early, and then he's got 12 in a row now since he's become a full member of the rotation. He's got a 2.91 ERA in those 12 starts. Couldn't ask for much more than that. Wasn't striking out guys in his first 6 of those. He had 4 or fewer in each of them. But in his last 6 starts, it's 5 or more in each of those. And on the season as a whole, he's slightly above average strikeout rate with a strong 5.7% walk rate. So that backs up his strong ERA, given that he's been good the whole time he's been a starter, and he's only really getting better lately. There's one blemish in there recently, but not a whole lot else. He seems like a very, very good bet to have one of those 5-6 innings, 2 runs, like he's done most of his recent outings.
You mentioned during power rankings that you have been liking the Eagles and then their bats a little bit more. Is there anyone deadly that we should be watching out for the Eagles that could go off against Choi or against the Bears bullpen?
There's no one deadly, no. But Brandon Barnes, worth mentioning, he did homer in 3 straight games last week. One of them was a grand slam to help upset the Bears. Maybe things are turning around for him. Still some pretty bad season numbers, and it's getting into the 40 or so, 40 to 50 games played. It's not like he just got over there at this point. So it's been pretty disappointing overall from him. Maybe he's turning things around now. He's still cheap enough that if you want to take a flyer on an Eagle, maybe him. But there's nothing I get particularly excited about.
It is the Eagles, after all, nothing crazy, even though they have been heating up recently. In terms of the Bears offense, the big question here is that offense going to be heating up for the playoffs? Will they get everything figured out? Jose Miguel Fernandez, our MVP candidate, doesn't have that many extra base hits, or really any recently, but he has been getting on base via just singles. Is there any room for concern with this offense and Fernandez, or will they just pretty much beat up on the Eagles in this 3-game series?
Yeah, Fernandez did make my cheat sheet today because he is on a 4-game hitting streak, and I felt like I had to write up at least one Bear. I ordinarily would have recommended the stack here, probably the stack of their top lefties with Fernandez, Jael, and Jaewon Kim all in a row. But Kim and O have been quite poor recently, along with most of the top of that order. But man, if they can't turn things around here against Jinwook Kim, I don't know when they're going to. Kim, he's not quite as bad as Seungmin Lee for the Lions, but just not much on his resume. I guess he did just have a good outing against the Bears. Held them to just 1 earned run, but he walked 3 while striking out 2, so it's hard to say he dominated their lineup. Just 7 strikeouts against 6 walks in his last 3 appearances. ERA on the season, pretty unimpressive. No real track record to speak of. He had less than 7 innings at the KBO level prior to this year. Pretty low strikeout rate, high walk rate on the year. In the Futures League, he's got an ERA of 5.96. So that's not a good sign. So just not much reason to be intimidated by him here. He's firmly not even a back-end starter. I think he's a swing man that they throw out there because they don't really have anybody else. And if the Bears' top bats, especially their top left-handed bats against the righty here, if they can't get it done here, they've got real problems, I think.
For sure, a good litmus test for this Bears offense. Should light it up. Total is set at 10.5 because of that. Bears big favorites minus 345. What's the pick here, Eric?
Easy Bears, much better lineup, much better pitcher. 10.5. If we figured Choi is going to hold them to 2 or 3, do we think the Bears can get 7 or 8? They should, but I'm going to say they are not going to just because they've all been slumping of late. I'm going to take the under. Some of that, again, is faith in Wonjun Choi. I think he's been quite good. And I might trust the Bears to get 6 or 7. given the quality of the pitching and given the quality of the pitcher. They should push 8 to 10, but they haven't shown necessarily that they can lately, so I'll stick under.
All right. We got the Bears and the under 10.5 in this matchup. Last game to break down. It's the Kia Tigers against the Kiwoom Heroes. Another matchup against a playoff team and kind of a playoff team, similar to what we saw with the LG Twins and the Lotte Giants. But with this matchup, starting with the Tigers, 5.34 ERA on the season. He was lit up his last start in 2 innings pitched. When you look at what he's done since August to September, even removing that start, he still has an ERA over 6. I can't imagine there's much room for hope. Maybe the strikeout numbers have been decent, but I can't imagine that the Heroes don't score at least something on this guy early on.
Yeah, and his awful start you were mentioning his last time out was against the same Heroes, I believe. Yeah, unfortunately, not much reason to have faith in him. He had an ERA of 5.73 last year, so his recent struggles are not a surprise given his history. But man, he looked like he was going to be something else. The start of this year, his first 9 starts, an ERA of 2.96, a WHIP of 121. Had high strikeouts, low walks. He looked like he was really going to strengthen that Tigers rotation, make them go 4 deep or so. But he's back to looking like barely a number 5 starter, and most of his recent starts have been quite bad. There are a couple, 2 of his last 4, he struck out 8 while giving up a total of 3 runs in 12 innings. So he's still capable of it every now and then, but it's been increasingly less common, and I would expect the Heroes to have no real trouble with him. I've been disappointed enough in Im's recent performances that I recommended a hero stack in this one.
Well, going with the hero stack there, I like it, despite maybe, them being one of those mediocre teams last week. Should be able to turn things around with Jacob Brigham on the bump. He has been impressive, and he's been back for a while. I didn't realize how many starts he's actually had now since returning from injury, much like Chris Flexen. Brigham, since August 13th, 2.66 ERA, and he was actually even lit up during one of those starts for 6 runs, and his ERA is still under 3. That's how good he's been. The strikeout number is 52 against just 14 walks. I would imagine this would be an easy Kiwoom Heroes victory because of this guy.
Yep, and the Tigers offense ranks just 7th in the league, haven't done much all year. Brigham started out very shaky, but it was clearly related to elbow issues. I mean, he's had several good years in the KBO. Had an ERA of 4.91 in his first 8 starts, which includes 6 before the injury, and then his first 2 back weren't particularly good. But he's settled in to be everything you want, 2.66 ERA, like you mentioned, in his last 8. And in only one of those 8 did he allow more than 2 earned runs, and very frequently allowing 0 or 1. And if you look at just his last 3, he's been even better, an ERA of 2 and a WHIP of 0.83 with 22 strikeouts in 18 innings in his last 3. So it's a very good pitcher who's pitching at his best. Should make it a pretty easy Heroes win, I would think.
Yeah, the only thing here we're looking into a little bit more is he is going to be facing the Kia Tigers on back-to-back starts. Does that worry you a bit? I think we saw the same thing with Aaron Brooks facing the Twins earlier this year, like 3 times in a row, and that can make a good pitcher look pretty bad because the KBO is so small and these players can adjust pretty easily. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that is a factor. Generally, if you face a guy too many times in a row, it's the same principle that hurts a pitcher his second and third time through the lineup. Is they learn your stuff. Learning a hitter it doesn't matter nearly as much because the pitcher just makes his pitches to the best spots he can, and they have all the data on these guys anyway. I think physically seeing a hitter doesn't really help a pitcher, whereas actually seeing what a pitcher's pitches look like from within the batter's box does help a hitter. So it's a factor, but it's going to be outweighed by the fact that Brigham is so good and the Tigers lineup is so mediocre. If we look back on this and they did upset them, I think you could point to that as a reason why, but it's not what I would expect to happen here.
Okay, not a huge factor there, not on the 3rd time here, just the 2nd time, and it's been a little while. In terms of the Tigers offense, Preston Tucker is there, but just 2.4 runs per game for Kia their last 7. They have not been doing well offensively. Are you avoiding them in terms of stacks and DFS plays and basically the total too?
Yeah, I mean, definitely against Brigham, I would not have much interest in playing them. Hyungwoo Choi has been good for several weeks now, but this wouldn't be the game I would go for him in. So definitely would be all about the heroes on both sides of the ball for DFS purposes here.
Yeah, Choi is one of the guys as well. 467 batting average in his last 21 at bats. Some impressive stuff from the Tigers, number 4 batter. Tigers against the Heroes. Heroes big favorites. Total is set at 9.5, and this game will be played. It is in a dome. What's the pick here, Eric?
Definite heroes. The over-under is interesting just because I think Brigham is so dominant and I think Im is so shaky. I'll side under just because I think Brigham really could hold this team to 1 or so runs over 6-7 innings. And I think it's more likely that Im has one of his good starts than Brigham has a bad one. But the game is so one-sided, I think overall, at least it looks that way, that you could easily see this as a 9-1 win for the Heroes or something.
Yeah, got to bank on Brigham tonight for the Heroes. Another good start. That's all 5 games covered, all of them. Look at the pitchers, look at the offense in case you missed it or you're just tuning in now. We've been doing the show KBO Chats live for the entire season every Monday and Thursday. Now finally back to that where we're actually looking at the series starting it. That's how we originally scheduled it. Now we're back to that KBO schedule. Eric, what are the top 3 picks now for the slate between all the picks of both money line and total?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with 3 teams here. I see some people going for some totals. I do like the totals that are mentioned there, but I think Brigham and the Heroes over Im and the Tigers that we just talked about. I think that's going to be number 1. I just have a ton of faith in Brigham right now and none in Im, and the Heroes have a better lineup. So I think that one should be pretty clear. I think we'll go with Rucinski and the Dinos as number 2. As we talked about, the Wyverns do have a pretty good pitcher in Sungwon Moon going here, but just about everything points in the Dinos' favor. Better starter in Drew Rucinski. Sungwon Moon is good, but Rucinski has been very good for most of the year, including recently, and they have an excellent lineup. So that's number 2. And number 3 for me, despite the history between those 2 teams, which should be a Bears win over the Eagles, I have a pretty good amount of faith in Wonjun Choi based on how he's pitched really over his last 6 starts particularly, but the entire time he's been in the rotation has been quite good. No faith in Jinwook Kim, even though the Eagles have been doing better and the Bears lineup is struggling. The gap between the pitchers and lineups overall, I think, is too strong that I do have to go with the longer resumes here over a bit of sort of anomalous recent form.
Top 3 picks then: Heroes, the Dinos, and Bears. Some of the best teams in the KBO, missing out on the LG Twins and the KT Wiz. But those are the top 3 picks. The comments are blowing up right now with thanks and picks of their own. Eric, I don't know if you can see any here, but Barry, a long-time viewer here, going with the same picks. Deuce and Bears is a maybe for him, though. Is there anything else you would say about this Bears team that you feel confident in them beating their rival, if I put it, in the Eagles?
I mean, it's a bet on Choi, and it's a bet on their lineup has to come around eventually. So many strong lefties against a weak righty. This has to be the time, and I think Jose Fernandez at least is starting to show signs that he's heating up again. But I get having a more skepticism than expected given the recent form from those guys. Yeah,
that's what we're looking at then. Feeling good with the Bears. I think they'll be able to beat the Eagles finally. And again, top 3 picks there: the Kiwoom Heroes, the NC Dinos, and the Deuce and Bears. As always, check out rotowire.com/free KBO to check out the expected lineups, power rankings, everything we covered in today's show. Check out the replay on YouTube and Periscope as well. and through all the teams where they're at right now. And that's what we got. Standings as well. rotowire.com/free KBO for all this and more. Even looking at the Kia Tigers, how many runs they're scoring per game right now. All that and more. rotowire.com/free KBO. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.